This episode contains material that might be triggering for some. If you need to stop the podcast at any time to take care of yourself, please do so.
If you need support, you can call the 24/7 National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255. Dialectical behavior therapy was created in the 1980s by Marsha Linehan in Seattle, Washington.
Today, DBT is taught all over the world.
We're two therapists who believe everyone can benefit from DBT skills.
I'm Kate.
I'm Michelle.
And this is DBT and Me. Hello, everyone.
Hi, guys.
Welcome to Q&A number 28.
28, my birthday number. That's
Oh.
all I could think of with 28. I was born on the 28th.
I like it. I know, I'm waiting for it to get up to my age.
Oh,
Which is
yeah,
gonna take
there
a
you
little
go.
bit. Ideally, we'll get to it before my age goes up another year.
I think we will. I feel confident in that.
Oh, man.
Still
All right,
wait
well,
till your birthday.
28. Here we go. You start us off today, Michelle.
I do. So this one says, there's a potentially huge and life-changing negative situation going on in my life right now, and I feel so sick and panicky I can hardly stop worrying about it. Can anyone recommend any skills to try? It's been a long time since I've practiced any, but I don't want to feel like this.
Oh, I bet you don't want to feel like that. It sounds like an eggy way to be feeling. On the other hand, before I dive into the skills, which I will, I just want to say an amount of feeling sick and worried makes probably sense.
Yeah.
If there's a potentially huge and life-changing situation, I just want to say, have a little bit of kindness for yourself, because it sounds like most of the emotions you're feeling are appropriate, right? So we can take breaks, we can try and reduce the severity, right? We can do things to address it, but I always try and set people's expectations appropriately, and not feeling that way, like at all, is probably not an appropriate expectation. Because those are appropriate feelings. So, if you did check the facts for this, I bet you'd end up finding that your feelings are appropriate. That's all I'm saying. So, feel like this less, I'm behind you. Not feel like this, I don't think we're going to get there. So there's my, public service announcement.
Your disclaimer.
My disclaimer. There we go. But as to skills, the first thing I think about is accepts, because as I will probably state numerous times as we go through this podcast, I like accepts better than improve. But they're both worthy options, because when something is looming in your life, distraction is nice. It's good. It's healthy. Take a breather, right? Again, those emotions are pretty appropriate, and we all deserve some time off from even the most appropriate emotions if they're overwhelming and unpleasant. So, accepts is the first thing I think of. Secondly is mindfulness. I'm going to make hand gestures now, which is going to be super helpful to all you people listening to us. Sarcasm. Mindfulness gives you this little half step away from your situation. Once you're in a place of observing what's going on in you, as opposed to just being in what's going on in you, that tiny bit of distance can have a surprisingly large impact on what the experience is like. So I would highly recommend spending some deliberate time being mindful of your current experience, of what's going on for you emotionally, physically. Probably those two things are connected, right? Because that little step back, so you're in an observating. Wow, I cannot talk today. I'm in an observing position. Yeah, can do a surprising amount to help reduce the severity of how you're experiencing the situation. And last but certainly not least, I think of self-soothe. Pardon me, yawning. Because it sounds like shit's rough. And while self-soothe is not going to make the situation any better, because, most skills can't make the situation any better, it's good practice to be taking care of yourself, to be being kind to yourself. And really, self-soothing is an embodiment of self-compassion, I think. And it sounds like you could use some compassion from others and from yourself. So, accepts, mindfulness, and self-soothe are the skills that I would point to. Mm-hmm. What about you, Michelle?
Yeah. I'm going to throw one more into the mix. We don't know what this huge and life-changing negative situation is that this listener is referring to. It could be any number of things. But the skill that came up for me reading this was thinking about effective rethinking and paired relaxation. The reason why I went to that skill is because of this physiological component that they're talking about. As Kate said, it would not be realistic to expect that you're going to not ever feel sick or panicky about this. But hopefully we can bring that down a little bit so that it feels less overwhelming, less extreme, and maybe doesn't impact your functioning so much. Mm-hmm. And the paired relaxation piece of this skill, right, which has a super long name, is there for that reason. It's to literally help your body practice. How can I think about this situation that leads to me worrying? And how can I hold space for thinking about that and feeling calm within my body? And when you can put those two things together, you can literally train your brain to basically have this experience where you're thinking about the big stressful situation. And when you think about that big stressful situation, you can easily remember, if you practice it enough, to then engage in some deep breathing and some really intentional thinking that will be calming, rather than thinking that's going to be anxiety provoking. Yeah, exactly. And ramp you up. Yeah. So go ahead and listen to that episode if you haven't already. Even if you have, I would go back and listen to it, because I'm not going to go super in depth into what the skill is. But essentially that's the essence of how it works. And I think that could be really helpful here. Like, for example, if the big situation in your life is that you're facing a big medical issue, and let's say you're having to go to a lot of doctor's appointments, and every doctor's appointment, you don't know what prognosis you're going to get. What you can do to practice this is to really think about imagining yourself in the doctor's office, giving yourself a calming phrase, and practicing some deep breathing. And if you practice that leading up to that doctor's appointment, you're hopefully going to feel less stressed and overwhelmed when you're there. So that's one way it could look. But it's essentially like some really safe mental exposure is kind of what we're getting at with that skill. So I hope it will help, along with all the other things that Kate talked about, which I second 100%.
All right. Are we ready for the next one?
Yes.
All right. This one says...
Oh, you're reading it. Oops. For a second, I thought I was. Okay, I'm going to shut up and let you read.
Awesome. Okay. Well, now I've scrolled too far. There we go. This one says, hello, I've been listening to this podcast on my morning walks, and it's been extremely helpful. I've listened to most of the episodes already, and right now I'm on the urge surfing episode. Are there any tips on that were not covered in the episode? Is it a bad idea to distract yourself by going on a walk or putting yourself away from the impulse in question? Should I simply sit down or stand still in front of the trigger to experience the peak? The reason I ask is I often have spurts of really intense emotions during the day that I have a hard time describing, and for years I've used food or impulse shopping in order to quell them. It's gotten out of hand during the pandemic, maybe due to accumulated stress. I have attempted urge surfing recently, and the emotions I experienced were so intense and indescribable that I'm afraid to do it again. It doesn't help that I've tried it right when I was falling asleep, so I couldn't fully experience the relief of the fall from the peak. I only recall the negative intensity of it. Please tell me it gets easier.
Yeah, this was such a good question to ask because it led to me thinking back to when we recorded that episode, which I can't remember all the details. I know we did a lot of personal sharing in that episode, but we also mostly did, I think, kind of explaining the concept of the skill. Yeah. And this listener brings up a good point because I don't think we really touched on that of like, what do you do when you are urge surfing or like riding the wave? Like, yeah, I mean, it's a great question of, do you just face the triggering thing, or is it okay to distract yourself and find some helpful things to cope? So, I mean, Kate's going to respond too, but we both were on the same page reading this of like, yes, by all means, find healthy things that will help you ride that wave. The goal with urge surfing is to not do the urge. That's the goal. So, right? The most common way that this is used, what Kate talked about when we recorded that episode, if your urge is to self-harm, the goal is to not self-harm. And ideally, the goal is probably not to turn to anything else that could be potentially unhealthy, addictive, destructive either, right? Wouldn't necessarily be great if like, okay, I didn't self-harm, but I wound up drinking a large quantity of alcohol, right? We don't want that to be the outcome. But there are so many things that you can do while you are surfing that urge and waiting for it to pass, right? So I love that this listener actually brought up, is it okay to distract yourself by going on a walk? Going on a walk or doing some kind of physical activity is one of the best things that I think you can do, when you're riding the wave. Yeah, do something physical with your body that feels good to you. And again, is not going to be harmful to your body. Don't push yourself too hard. Don't take it to any extreme degree. But yes, doing something active can be a fantastic way to ride the wave. I'm also a big fan of journaling when you're in a really heightened emotional state, because that's not avoiding what you're feeling. That's really you allowing yourself to feel the emotions, and also it gives you something to do with them. Put them on the page, right? So you're really facing the trigger, but hopefully being able to write about it. And I honestly recommend, if you can, using good old-fashioned pen and paper. Mm-hmm. Our brains process things differently when we handwrite than when we type. So if you can do some journaling, that can be a really healthy way to face what you're feeling. And, you know, if your hand won't cramp up too bad, journal throughout the whole like peak and then fall, right? I also think it can be really healthy and helpful to talk to someone about it. You know, if let's say the urge that you're struggling with is an urge to use drugs or alcohol and you're working on being sober, if you have like a sponsor or someone else in sobriety that you can call that person, talk with them, have them on the phone with you while you're urge surfing. That can be really helpful and healthy. So yeah, I'm really glad that this listener asked this question to clarify. Because, yeah, we don't want you to just feel helpless. We want you to feel empowered when you're riding the wave.
The enormous urge is just to say, ditto. But I will try to resist. I will echo, though, immediately, yes, feel free to do things to distract yourself. That is a lovely way to handle it. I know that when I was talking about urge surfing for my self-harm, I guess I oughtn't to say I know. I'm pretty sure I focused mostly on the very first time that I did it successfully. And in that particular instance, the urge had been so intense and the emotions were so intense in the moment I don't know that I could have even figured out the concept of distraction or doing anything else. So I really did just sort of go fucking through it. I understand the idea of intense and indescribable emotions that you're afraid to experience again, because, yep, I get that. And if that's how you do it, then that's how you do it. And I don't want to put down that way of doing it if that's how people choose to, and they are able to do that. That's a fine choice, but also it's certainly not the only choice that can be made. So to sort of update that, I will say that was how it was for me the first time I tried to do, successfully did, urge surfing around self-harm. More recently, I do one of the things Michelle was talking about, which is I tend to, she says call, but I'm of my generation enough that I'm like, oh God, why? Who uses phones for phone calls? Yes. But I will literally just text a couple of, friends of mine. I'll say something like, I'm really wanting to self-harm right now. Like, I need a good reason not to. Because sometimes my brain won't give that to me. So what I know I can do is reach out to this human being and say, I need a good reason not to do this. Right? Or I need help through this, or can you distract me? Or something like that, right? That's actually much more common in the more recent history for me, rather than the just sitting there and going through it tactic that I took that first time. So yeah, absolutely do other stuff. That is totally fine. If you know that there's certain books or movies that you can watch that tend to have a huge impact and help you get through stuff, awesome. If you have people you can reach out to, awesome. If you want to journal or walk, awesome. Because as Michelle said, the goal is to not do the thing. Now, grant you, if you're doing distraction or other stuff like that, then ride the wave can get a little fuzzy about if it's just ride the wave or if you're sort of using accepts in order to ride the wave or something like that. But that's totally okay. You don't have to be a purist. I guess there are probably some people who think you have to be a purist. Neither Michelle nor I think you have to be a purist. Use what works. The goal is to not do the thing. What helps you not do the thing? As long as it's healthy, awesome! You didn't do the thing, and instead you did a healthy thing. Fuck yeah. Cool. Goal met. So, I too am glad that this person wrote in, because I realized that, yes, when I talked about it, I just talked about the, weeping so hard you vomit thing, right? Like, which, was what happened for me, but is certainly not the only way to go through that. I just wanted to normalize that for people who do have that experience. That's okay and doesn't count as failure, and that it will be better later, which is true, because after doing it that way a few times, I started having not having enough of a brain. It wasn't stupid to do it that way to begin with, but I was out of the experience enough that I could think to do other things as well, like reach out to friends. So, yeah. Do those things, yes.
Cool.
All right, okay. Now it's you.
Now it's me, yes. Okay. This one says, hi, my partner of 13 years has just ended things with me to be with a 19-year-old work colleague. I don't do DBT, but have read about various bits, and I have BPD. What skills can I use to not feel like I want to just smash and break stuff and make things worse? I just feel so angry and upset and abandoned right now.
I know that no one can see me, but the grimace I was making during the first time I read that and during listening to Michelle read that is just, it's one of extreme and not empathy, compassion. Because fuck.
Yeah. I feel like disgust coming up in me of like, fuck your partner. Right. How dare they? Like, which is anger too, but like I just kind of feel like this
righteous indignation. Right? Yeah, on behalf of this person.
That's so wrong.
I think I was making the disgust face. Yes, exactly. So, to start with, I simply want to say that being angry is pretty fucking appropriate. Why would you not be? I kind of want to smash and break stuff for you. Right? Plus, you talk about having BPD. So, yeah, right? Fears of abandonment is a pretty common symptom of that. Not ubiquitous, but it's a pretty common one, and you're kind of being abandoned, right? This is a lot closer than the imagined, abandonment that can also really haunt people with BPD. So I just wanted to start with a giant, heaping dose of validation for the emotions that you describe, because Jesus! So, on the other hand, I do understand that perhaps you like your, things and would not like to actually smash and break them because you'd like to have them later. And, making things worse, sort of by definition, doesn't make things better. So, I appreciate the desire not to engage in the impulses that may also be going along with your emotional state. So, this isn't explicitly DBT, unless Michelle can turn it into DBT, because she's pretty good at that, so we'll see. But the first thing that came to my mind is to, I put this in air quotes, like, use your anger. Use your being upset, right? Because anger wants you to do stuff. You point that out rather lovely with the smash and break and make things worse, right? It wants you to do stuff. That's what anger is for. It's to take action, do things. So my first suggestion is to do things, just not those things.
Maybe intense exercise from Tip.
Ooh, there you go.
Into a DBT
yes, see, superpower. Yes, right. Do things, just not the things you're trying not to do. Right? So, instead of smashing breakable things, perhaps take a pillow and beat the ever-loving shit out of your couch. I will tell you from personal experience that can be equally exhausting and gratifying, surprisingly. As someone who also has, on occasion, both had the impulse to break things and, admittedly, on a few occasions, have broken things. Because I at least find that after beating the shit out of something with a pillow, I feel good. And after breaking something, I feel good for about half a second, then I think, oh, fuck.
Yeah.
Now I have to clean that up. Now I don't have that thing anymore, whatever it was that I broke. Now I have embarrassment and shame about having had that action. So it doesn't actually do what I want it to do, as well as some of the less destructive things. So if you're one of those insane human beings who likes to go for a run, go run your anger and upset out, go beat the crap out of furniture safely with soft objects. If you have a punching bag, that's even better. Right? Do things. Use your anger. Move with it. And I suspect that that's going to have one of the best ways of both honoring the fact that your emotions are pretty appropriate, and avoid doing things that ultimately you really don't want to do, even though you're having the impulse to do them. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah. Excuse me. I just had this bird come up right when it was my cue
to start
talking.
Perfect. Because when else would it happen?
Yeah, of course. Okay. Yeah, so totally agree with everything Kate just said. I will also add on something I'm a big fan of. Just screaming.
Oh, yeah. True story.
Screaming. I mean, either screaming like, ah, or screaming words. Right? Like that you want to say to that person. But screaming. Sit in your car and scream. Whatever.
Yes.
Big fan of it.
Into pillows.
Yeah.
Speaking of
your
pillows.
Shower. Into pillows. Yeah. Anywhere that you like, especially if you have privacy, because then you can feel really safe to say whatever you want to say. So, big fan of that. The thing that kind of came to mind for me, because you mentioned, like, I don't really do DBT. So, I'm going to just kind of throw in this general framework that DBT has when you're feeling a really big emotion. I think in opposite action, they have this, like, decision-making tree.
Oh, yeah.
It either comes up with check the facts or opposite action. Basically, the idea behind it is that when you feel an emotion really strongly, always DBT says, you got to know what the emotion is. Well, you know what your emotion is here. You're pissed. Of course you are, like Kate would say. And then it takes you through these steps. And basically, the first step is to try to check the facts. To get to a point of checking the facts, you probably have to do some of the stuff that Kate was just talking about to be able to activate your prefrontal cortex. the actual part of our brain that can help us make good decisions. If we're so emotionally overloaded, that part of our brain isn't going to be working very well. So do some of the things like she was saying, to use your anger and move with it, to maybe bring it down a couple notches. And the goal here is not to shame yourself or to say that your anger is wrong, because it's not. The goal here is to, right? You're saying like, I want to just smash and break stuff, but I know that's going to make things worse. The goal here is to figure out what else you can do. And we got to use our prefrontal cortex to help with that. So essentially, once you can bring your prefrontal cortex back into the picture a little bit, then what you do is essentially you check the facts. And in order to check the facts, you're going to use a little bit of your wise mind. Your wise mind is already at play here a little bit because, yeah, like you said, you know that will make things worse to just smash and break stuff. So checking the facts. Here's what I can almost guarantee will happen if you check the facts with this situation. Your anger fits the facts, listener. I think.
Yep. Big agree.
I think it does. Right? And then the thing that DBT says, though, is, okay, so if my emotion fits the facts, then I need to, really notice what that emotion is telling me. And I have to decide if I'm going to do what the emotion tells me to do, or if I'm going to choose to do something different. And in this case, if the anger is like completely justified and the anger is also telling you to smash and break stuff, yep, wise mind would tell us that's not going to probably help or make things better. And then we wind up moving.
Effective.
It's not effective. Exactly. That's a very common DBT term. It's not effective. So what would be effective? What can you do, right? And that's when using opposite action would be helpful. So I hope that made sense. Basically, it's like once you know that you feel angry, then it's looking at, does my anger check the facts? If my anger does check the facts, what is the anger telling me to do? And does wise mind tell me to listen to the anger or to make a different decision? And opposite action might look like some of the stuff that Kate was talking about. I don't have in front of me the sheet that DBT has, because DBT has sheets that match up for each different emotion, right? So DBT has an opposite action sheet for anger. Mm-hmm. I just don't have it in front of me, so I don't know exactly what it says on there off the top of my head. But, I think it, in large part, if you are going to act opposite your anger, people kind of have this general idea of walking away. If someone's really making you mad, it's probably best to leave the room, take a break, like that kind of an idea, if they were literally right in front of you. If you are in your house and you are wanting to smash and break stuff in your house, probably a good idea to maybe go for a walk, go for a drive. Like, get away from the situation is some pretty general opposite action that you can take. So that's, I would say, what I would recommend is really just figuring out what opposite actions are available to you, so that you're not going to wind up turning to smashing and breaking the stuff, which, like you said, it's not going to change anything about him being in this relationship. If you smash and break stuff, guess what? Once you're done smashing and breaking stuff, he's still going to be in this relationship.
Yeah.
And I realized, I think I'm saying he. I don't know if they say that at all. So that's my assumption and my bias.
Oh, fair enough. Yep.
I don't actually know if it's a male partner.
Fair enough.
Who's now with his 19-year-old work colleague, but that's where my head went. But anyways, your partner, I'll take pronouns out of it, will still be in that relationship. So It's figuring out, what wise mind choices you can make so that you're not doing things that you're later going to regret.
All right. I like it. Yeah. Last one now.
Last one. Yeah.
All right. This one says, I'm so frustrated right now. I work with my boyfriend and it's very difficult. I work masonry and labor. I didn't do something right and I reacted. My boyfriend said I'm so annoying and I turned to brush it off, but I couldn't and I lost it on him. Now I'm sitting on my break, closing down. He keeps telling me he doesn't have time to work on the relationship right now. He has to get these jobs done. I don't know how to deal with that because I'm bottling up my feelings and will eventually explode. I'm so sick of being so sensitive. Everything bothers me so much. I feel so alone. My boyfriend who literally is the only one that could handle my shit, and now he can't, and I'm exploding all the time.
Yeah. Listener, everything that I'm about to say is said with so much love. It is. I don't want this to come across as judgmental in any way. I just want to help you. And really the first thing that stood out to me about this is that there's a lot of black and white thinking going on, right? When we say things like, everything bothers me so much. I'm exploding all the time, right? The words we use are powerful. Because the more we use certain terms, it just strengthens those neural pathways in our brain. So we want to be really mindful of which pathways we're giving energy to and which ones we're strengthening. So the words we use matter. And I would really encourage you to just be mindful of that. When you catch yourself saying, everything bothers me so much, check that. Right? Is everything bothering you so much? Or is it really just these one or two things?
Or even just a lot of things?
Okay.
But not everything.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So just being really, really mindful of that. I recognize that this post, at least my sense from what this listener posted, is that this really was a post that was kind of made in the heat of the moment, right? I think we have listeners who post in the Facebook group sometimes days or even weeks after like a triggering event has happened. This listener sat and posted on their break. Yeah. Like this had just happened. So I understand that the emotions were probably pretty big and pretty overwhelming at the moment. And that it's hard to then be able to rein ourselves in and check those facts and that kind of a thing. Yeah, that's going to be tough when the triggering thing just happened. And also, just be aware of it. The other thing that stood out to me is when the listener says, I don't know how to deal with that because then I'm bottling up my feelings and will eventually explode. So, exploding does not have to be an eventual possibility. Maybe that has been a pattern in the past, but that doesn't have to be what happens this time. And the idea of bottling things, I think it's important to hone in on that because a lot of times when people come to DBT and when they're learning DBT, they recognize that there have been a lot of times in their lives where they didn't really regulate their emotions. They just completely ignored their emotions. And then, right, the emotions do kind of get bigger and bigger. So there's a key difference between I'm moving through my life mindlessly, I'm not paying attention, or I'm actively avoiding, versus using your wise mind to recognize that, as weird as it sounds, sometimes we do have to temporarily bottle things. We do, especially when it comes to work, which is where this listener was at when this post was made, right? Sometimes we have to tell ourselves, I cannot have this emotional response right now. To use what you said earlier, Kate, it will not be effective if I respond in this way, in this setting, in this moment.
Yep.
I definitely want to make sure I attend to my emotions. And I also have to wait 2 more hours until my shift is done. And then I can go do X, Y, and Z. But right now, I do have to wait. I do have to kind of temporarily bottle. And that doesn't mean that I'm going to explode. Because I can make a plan for when I can express and face this emotion. Right now, though, is not the time. So what can you do when that's what's coming up? The biggest things that I think about if you do temporarily need to put an emotional experience on hold, use some mindfulness. Mindfulness is about the here and the now, right? Especially when you're at work. Honestly, I believe that no matter what you do for a living, there are so many things to be mindful of when we're on the job. Like certain tasks or projects or emails or phones to answer or whatever it is. Like really just try to mindfully focus on the thing that you're doing in the moment. And I really recommend using accepts, because accepts is the distraction skill, especially the P in accepts, which stands for push away, because that's really in essence what you're doing here. To say, I'm going to push this away for the next little bit, and then I'm going to come back to it. And push away talks about how you can use like a lot of visualization exercises, like imagine putting the issue in a box and putting it up on a shelf, kind of an idea. I'm going to pull that box down as soon as I get off work. Then I'm going to look at this, right? And those can be things that really help with patience. And I don't know, I didn't write this down in my notes, but it comes up for me hearing Kate reread this email. You know, I do get this sense from this listener that the boyfriend saying the comment about being so annoying is it's indicative of like a larger attachment wound. Like it's indicative, I get this sense reading the post of like, my boyfriend feels like the main person that I count on. And if that person is then saying that I'm annoying, like what does that mean? Right? What does that say? And so even though one could argue, oh, it's just a small comment, right? Like this listener even said, just brush it off. There's a larger wound going on here. I sense that there might even be larger relationship issues going on here. And that just felt like salt in the wound in the moment to hear a comment like that from him. So I totally get it. And also I think some of this is going to be trusting yourself that your emotional reactions are not going to stay at a 10. They might start off there, but there are things that you can do to cope, and there are things you can do to bring it back down. So just being really mindful of how you speak to yourself and making sure you're speaking about yourself with care and compassion in these moments where you're struggling. Because you have skills you can use. You have skills so that you're not exploding all the time, like you say at the end here. I think you have it within you to create a different experience. Yeah, those are my thoughts.
A, good job. I like all that. B,
thank you.
In listening to you talk, I'm like, well, fuck, actually, that's almost all the exact same thing. I just had different words to it.
I know. I mentioned check the facts. I mentioned mindfulness. 2 things you wrote down.
So that was just funny. So, gosh, how do I make it interesting to say something slightly different? Check the facts is the first skill that came up for me. You know, we, Michelle and I have often talked about the fact that we don't know, like, check the facts isn't meant just as a, like, I don't know, hopefully it's not meant at all as an invalidating tool, right? But, you know, you might often find that your emotional experience does fit the facts, but sometimes, I don't know, especially when it comes to thinking about other people, I guess I will own this, that I can get a little off the facts. Somebody makes one comment about something and I'll be like, they hate me. I'll be like, do I actually know that?
Yeah. The facts are that this is what they said.
Yes.
But I don't know if they always feel that way about me, or
exactly.
They didn't use the word hate, or they didn't. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm super prone to that. So I guess I don't know if this listener is too, but as you were pointing out, Michelle, sort of with the black and white thinking, I think that can go along with that a lot, right? This person said one negative thing, so blank. Or maybe even they say negative things all like regularly, but maybe that's more about them than about you, right? We don't know, because we have a real good, most of us are really good at spinning ourselves up. and it can take more deliberate action to sort of wind ourselves back down again. So check the facts was one of the things I thought of there, because at least for me, it helps reground me to what is real and what I actually know, and not just what I've spun up in my own head. That gets me more amped up. I think I won't say much more about mindfulness. Michelle, I think you did a great job of talking about how that can be utilized. But what I did want to talk about was using Dear Man, possibly, right? Not sounds like, the listener explicitly states that they work with their boyfriend. So that gives a lot of opportunity for problems, for conflict, for, this sort of cross wiring of the relationship and the work environment. So something that might be helpful, I don't know, maybe not, but it might be helpful to sort of sit down and do a Dear Man with your boyfriend about what he says or how he responds to things in the work environment. You're like, I need the work environment to be a little bit different than our home environment if you live together, or, outside of the work. So it might be something like, when we're at work, or like, I don't know, you often say things like, I'm annoying when we're at work. Well, that makes me feel hurt, and it distracts me from being able to continue with the job we're on. I'd really like it if you could phrase things a different way while we're at work. And this will help, me be a better coworker and, ultimately be good for our relationship as well. I just made that up off the spot. I hope it made sense. Right. And so there might be space for some Dear Man in the situation. If you're already in an emotionally vulnerable spot, how your boyfriend reacts to your emotional reaction is going to have a big impact on where things go from there. And so, he absolutely has a right to his own experience, how things are going, how it impacts him, whatever. So it's not about like, shut up, only my feelings matter. But it is talking about how he expresses his, his emotions and what's going on for him. So I just wanted to throw that out there as another possible skill that could be utilized.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That brings us to the end. Crazy enough.
Dun, dun, dun.
We did it. So, email us with questions, dbtandmepodcast@gmail.com, or post about them in the Facebook group. We think all of these came from the Facebook group. We're pretty confident. All the ones we read today. So, and that's a great place to find community and support with other people. So reach out to us in those ways, and we'll be back soon with Q&A 29.
Yay! Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Thanks.
To learn more about us and the DBT skills we're teaching each week, join our Facebook group. Simply log in to your Facebook profile and search for DBT and Me Podcast.